So we're going to continue in the middle of chapter 29 where we left off. It's about the end of the first third of the chapter, and you see it in the Hebrew text on page 72, about 9 lines from the top. Kinal Sefer Gimel, which is the end of the brackets. You could see it in the corresponding English text where it says ubifrat, right after the brackets ubifrat, which means specifically, and we're going to continue from this very word. And basically, the Alter Rebbe continues telling us, defining the Beinoni, as the Beinoni is attempting to break up and to deal with his guf and his guf, which means his body, his whole experience, that in order that the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, should penetrate into his system, and again based on that suggestion to the Timtum Halev, the blockage of the heart, which does not allow the Eira Neshama to penetrate, and again based on the suggestion of the Mesifta, the Rav Mesifta, the Rosh Hashiva in Gan Eden, which compares the life of the Beinoni to the guf, which is primarily the Beinoni, or namely the Beinoni, that just like a piece of wood, a log, which you want to ignite it in order that the fire should penetrate into the log, you got to break it up, because the log, the stiffness of the log, as it is, if you will, does not allow, even though the material is perfect, is dry wood. What could you have better than dry wood in order that to carry a fire? But yet the fire will not penetrate, it will not last, it will not burn nicely in this piece of wood, because it's again stiff and it needs to be broken up. And so too he says gufa, the body which the Eira Neshama does not penetrate, so mevachinle, you have to crush it. And again he gives different suggestions how to the Beinoni, how to crush it, and ultimately one of the just to keep it again in the right context over here, Alter Rebbe says ruach nishbara, a broken spirit, which that breaks up the sitra achra on the original on its original level, in its original realm, and ultimately reflects in the Beinoni, in the life in the Beinoni, in his nefesh bahamis, and in his whole experience, that which ultimately will allow, again, one of the ways that the Eira Neshama is able to be to penetrate into the nefesh, into the Beinoni, into the guf of the Beinoni. So he says ruach nishbara, the spirit to be broken, or leiv nishbara, a broken heart, a broken spirit. He says, when I say broken spirit, again, we mentioned this a few times, just in the last two classes, because we want to keep we want to demonstrate the context over here. In other words, what context is it Alter Rebbe telling this all about the Beinoni, that in essence who he is nefesh bahamis. Basically the message the Alter Rebbe says, if you want to describe the Beinoni, define the Beinoni, everything about him is the animal soul, which is the lowest, conceptually, the lowest creature can ever exist. It says even lower than Balei Chayim Atmeim, as Alter Rebbe explained last week, in last week's class, that the Balei Chayim Atmeim, which is creepy creatures which are impure, and again the reason why they're impure is because they're connected to Shalosh Klipos Atmeis, to the lowest level of impurity, but nonetheless they're programmed. That's the way they were created. They didn't bring themselves into this state, into this lowly state, and they cannot rebel in against their Creator. Again, the pasuk that Alter Rebbe quoted in the previous chapters, in chapter I believe 24, Layuchal Bilam says Layuchal Laver as Pi Hashem, despite that he represented, Bilam represented, and it was a conduit to the Shalosh Klipos Atmeis, the spirit of impurity. Yet he says Layuchal Laver as Pi Hashem, I cannot violate, I cannot transgress the words of Hashem. And so too even Balei Chayim, again, which are Tmeim, which are categorically impure, because they receive their energy from the Shalosh Klipos Atmeis, which makes them Tmeim. In the end of the day, They are not. They do not. That's the way they were created, and they cannot. And they do not violate the word of the dictate of their creator. As opposed to man, the Beinoni, as explained last week, can do so. Has the ability to desire. He won't do it. Remember, we said he won't do it because once he actually violates, if he would give in to the signal of that temptation which comes from heart to mind, to his thought, to his speech, to his action, if he violates, he allows the signal to accepts that signal. In other words, he does something, he speaks something, or even thinks something contrary to Hashem's desire. He becomes a Rash. He's no more a Beinoni. So hence he deserves much credit for his efforts and so on. But if you're trying to describe who he is an entity that can desire to do things which are completely contrary to Hashem's ratzin, to Hashem's will, even though again he's determined never to do them, never to speak of them, and never to think of them, but nonetheless he has his animal soul is completely intact. As we mentioned, the animal soul once we understand that the animal soul is all about being animalistic, which means doing, thinking, and speaking anything which contributes to its comfort. There's no clear red or stop sign or red line between the permissible and the prohibited. Hence, the Beinoni can have a desire because again of his nefesh bahamis. He is an entity which has a desire, can have a desire to do something which is neged ratzon Hashem, against Hashem's will. Categorically, he is lower than any other, even balei chayim atmeim, even than creatures which are tamei, which are impure, again because of their connection and association, or rather their connection to shalosh klipas hatmeis, which again this is the lowest level of impurity as we have discussed in detail in the past. It brings from David HaMelech the pasuk Vanechi Selas V'lei Ish. Again, as we explained the previous in the past week, we elaborated on this point, and the Alter Rebbe is coming and again culminating this idea that when the Beinoni, we speak about a ruach nishbar, a broken heart of the Beinoni, or a broken spirit. This broken spirit, it's not the broken spirit of his godly soul. Everything about the Beinoni is primarily his animal soul. So we speak about a broken spirit, and that's who he is. And the neshama, he says, "Neshanasata bi." Remember, the Alter Rebbe spoke about that the proof which we say every day, based on what we say every day in Birchas HaShachar, in the morning blessings. Neshama shenasata bi. You gave me a neshama, which means who am I? I'm the nefesh bahamis. Therefore, when we speak about ruach nishbar, a broken spirit. It's a broken spirit. It's breaking the spirit of the animal soul, or the animal soul, as the animal soul is a conduit to the spirits of impurity, which magbi matn kanesha, they raise themselves up at the highest levels with chutzpah to make their presentation. And the nefesh bahamis is the host, which hosts this nesher, which this chutzpah of the nesher of the eagle, as it's compared to in the pasuk, and it constantly nags on the guf, on the irktana, on the small city, which the Alter Rebbe says is the body with its thought, with its speech, and its action, with presentations and signals which want to override and want to take charge of man's thought, speech, and action. So therefore, in order that the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, should ultimately penetrate into this guf, into the experience of the Beinoni, there has to be a ruach nishbara, like nishbar, broken heart, and a broken spirit, again, because a broken spirit is breaking the spirit of the nefesh bahamis. Now, whenever nefesh bahamis represents on all levels, the Rebbe continues, and again, you can see all this on in the previous classes I mentioned again in koshertube.com, which we are thankful to host this important shir, and with the text on TanyaOnline.com, and which is pretty much updated to the last very recent classes, and is constantly updated on a constant basis. So we continued over here, befrat, and specifically kishiyizker tumas nafshi, when man will remember, when the Beinoni remembers the impurity of his soul, which he himself caused in his youth, b'chatas neurim, which is a classic term used that when literally translated the sins of the youth, when the Yetzer Hara was much, which stood with its peak, or rather say the nadir experience of passion. It's the lowest level of passionate experience, or passionate expression, rather. It's nadir expressions, passionate expressions, when at that time of one's youth, where overall in the person's life, it is, one could suggest, justifiably suggest, that's when the real challenges exist, and many times, especially one has not adequately matured enough in his Avodas Hashem, in his service to God, as he grows older, when mind is more developed and understands things clearer, including for this which he came down to this world, to be serious with his Avodas Hashem, and his learning Tainas, doing mitzvahs, staying away from anything which is chas v'shalom neged ras Hashem, against Hashem's will, in action, in speech, and in thought, and in the life of the Beinoni, in order to him to understand, or to put in perspective who he really is, again in contrast to the tzaddik. If you remember, we spoke about Hillel, the tzaddik, all about the tzaddik is his nefesh elikis, his godly soul, is the holy and divine experience. By the Beinoni, in contrast to the Beinoni, that by the Beinoni it's just the opposite. The neshama shenasato bi means to say, I'm not the neshama, it's about my nefesh bahamis, and therefore this is again a way which the Beinoni could put things in perspective about himself, which would bring him to a leiv nishbar, broken heart and a broken spirit. But Alter Rebbe adds, particularly if he remembers, he takes account, he recounts the tumas nafshi, the impurity of his soul, with his sins of his youth, and the blemish which he has created as a result of his action, speech, or thought in the highest in the highest worlds, in the realms above. And one is going to argue, again, as an introduction to the subsequent words over here of the Alter Rebbe, well, that's been such a long time ago, and I have done tshuva, and I'm a Beinoni. I will add parenthetically, but it's important to take note. Alter Rebbe established, again, there's the famous question, the Rebbe deals with it in a number of letters, Igris of his response in many of his explanations on Tanya, which we were lucky over the years to see a new light, as the Rebbe sheds a new light on many of the chapters in Tanya, explaining many difficult areas, many difficult questions which over the years people have. Tanya, even though again Tanya is a icon of clarity on the overall, if you want to define the Tanya, it's a sefer of clarity, brings clarity to one's Avodas Hashem. But there was different areas where people had questions, and the Rebbe shed such beautiful new light on explaining, and again, namely smoothly, just pointing out what Alter Rebbe is trying to convey. And one of the questions is asked, Alter Rebbe says that Beinoni is le'over v'le'yaver. He never sinned, and he is an individual never sinned and never will sin. And then together with that, Alter Rebbe says that this is a level, this is a style in Avodas Hashem. Everybody ought to draw himself not necessarily to the Avodah of the Tzaddik, but the Avodah of the Beinoni. And what if Chas v'Shalom, and this is Kol Adam, every single person, Eleo Kol Adam Yimshach. That's Alter Rebbe believe the beginning of chapter 14. And if someone sinned, and Alter Rebbe himself describes the Beinoni, someone who le'avar v'le'yaver, he never sinned and he never will sin. So how is it that you can demand of every person to strive to be the Beinoni? On the onset, if Chas v'Shalom he sinned, God forbid, he's apparently disqualified on the onset. But the Rebbe makes it very clear that that Chas v'Chalila, the Alter Rebbe says Kol Adam Yimshech, he's referring to even Chas v'Shalom who sinned and someone who sinned in the past. And the meaning of Le'aver v'Le'yaver, again, we elaborated it, and then when we learned to this term, I believe in chapter 12, or 13, I believe it's 12, which the Alter Rebbe starts describing the Beinani, again, which is, he elaborates and takes a few chapters because it's the Sefer Shel Beinanim. This is the primary mandate which a Yid is, every Yid ought to strive to be the Beinani. So there, again, at the beginning of chapter Yud Beis, and towards the beginning of the 12th chapter, we spoke about this in a bit in length, defining this Le'aver v'Le'yaver, someone who never sinned in the past and will never sin. Basically, in a nutshell, the Rebbe says that it's his state now as a Beinani. He's somebody that is like a different person, or in his mode now, in his state right now, he's somebody that the notion of sin is completely unthinkable. Not in the past, not in the future. In other words, he's so removed from sin that you can say on him Le'aver, because this is his state now. And again, you could look there, we explained a little more in detail, but the reason I'm saying this, because here, which those ask the question, Dr. Rebbe says, he's speaking to the Beinani, and he's saying he can remember, Yizkir Befrat particularly, when he would remember the impurity of his soul, B'chatas Ne'urim, in sins of his youth. So if he sinned and he has sins of his youth, how could he ever be a Beinani? If the Alter Rebbe describes a Beinani, Le'avar miyomav, he never transgressed and never violated. But again, it's not a question, because we're dealing with somebody who uplifted himself to a new level, a new pedestal, a new level. He's on a new pedestal, rather, at a new level. He is the Beinani, but right now in his state, he's on a state that his whole past, the way it is aligned with today's state, is completely clean. And his future, aligned with today's state, the notion of sin, may it be in action, may speech, or in thought, is completely unthinkable. But again, here the Alter Rebbe says, we'll close that explanation in order to let's go on with where we're holding over here. The Alter Rebbe is basically saying to the Beinani, this is ultimately who you are. And the Beinani would argue, and again, as to clarify to what the Alter Rebbe is getting at with the subsequent words, that the Beinani is saying, this has been a long time ago, and I've done tshuva, and I'm a different person. So why are you reminding me the impurity of my soul and the blemish which I have accomplished on high, which I have made on high because of the sins of my youth? The Alter Rebbe says, "V'shamhu l'maylam azman." There, in the area where you made the blemish, it's higher than the whole notion of time. As we know, that time is a creation. When we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as again we spoke about this in the past, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows the future as an example. It doesn't mean Hashem has dynamic eyes which are able to see through 1 year, another year, and He's able to see 1,000 years down the line. That doesn't mean when Hashem. That doesn't describe at all the notion of Hashem knowing what's going to be in 1,000 years, knowing the future. Because the whole notion of this year, next year, and now, 5 minutes earlier, 5 minutes later, the hour, the day, the week, the month, these are all part of the package of time, which the whole Zman, the whole package of time is a mere creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where Hashem is, and from Hashem's domain, the whole 1,000 years doesn't exist. Right? Hashem is Haya, Heve, V'yeh. The past, the present, the future are essentially one. So today, in 1,000 years, in 10,000, in 2,000 years, or when Hashem's foreseeing 2,000 years, 3,000 years, it's not that there is years in that area where Hashem is looking from, because Hashem transcends the whole notion of time. And these are things which are basic, elemental. We understand this because we understand that the whole notion, again, it's elemental. This is based on what we learned in Tanya, and we learned time and again in Tanya. There's different from the perspective of Hashem. We could so much appreciate it. Chas v'shalom, God forbid to say Hashem is limited in time, and He has these dynamic eyes which are able to see through the different layers and levels of time. No, Hashem is transcendent of the whole notion of time. As it says Malchus, that's where the inception of time, that's where the commencement of, that's where the time initiates from. That's why actually we say by Melech, the level of Malchus. We're not going to go into all the entire explanation, but just to understand, by Malchus it says Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimlech, Hashem, and again here you see the idea, the notion of past, present, and future. But again, only when you're dealing with the Malchus, the lowest level of Hashem's 10 attributes, starting from Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chag, Yisod, and then Malchus, that's where time, the initiation of time, that's where it begins, that's where it commences, and naturally even on that level it's so much different the way it ultimately manifests in this very world, but that's where the beginning, the notion of time initiates. And that's where its connection, because at Darga Malchus, that's what has a shaykhus to the creation of all worlds. Malchuscha, Malchus kol elamim. It's Malchus which is Malchus kol elamim. Higher than that, the whole idea of Zman, mocking, place, time, doesn't exist. Doesn't even exist. Again, we said Shem Hashem. Hashem, one of the reason why Hashem is called Havaya, Yud Ki Vav Ki, was Haya Hayve V'Yekechad. The whole past and future and present and future is like what? And the reason Alter Rebbe is telling this to us, that because you're saying that this has been such a long time, the whole notion of time is only on this realm, in this realm where you are. That the place, unfortunately, where you made the blemish is in an area which is transcendent of time. And therefore, kilu pagam and itmayim chas v'shalom, as if you made the blemish and you purified your neshama, and you purified that level, which is again transcendent of time, today, chas v'shalom. Mamash, which means it's as if you literally sinned it today. And again, the Alter Rebbe is telling not to make the Beinoni feel bad, but again, understanding when we're speaking about the Ruach Nishbara, the broken spirit, the importance of the Lev Nishbara, the broken heart and the broken spirit, because you're dealing with the Beinoni. The entity of the Beinoni is a lowly type of entity, conceptually, and therefore, Alter Rebbe adds to this the impurity of his soul. With his sins of his youth and the blemish which he made on high, that area where he made the blemish, where he impurified, is transcendent of time, and therefore it's as if he sinned today. Which again is another reason that the Beinoni experiences, at least periodically, the Lev Nishbar, the Ruach Nishbara, broken heart and broken spirit. And again, this is not a contradiction to the Alter Rebbe's, the Alter Rebbe is so adamant in the previous chapters that the Beinoni and his Avodas Hashem remain steadfast with his simcha v'tuv levav, with his joy and elation and pleasant and gladness of heart in his Avodas Hashem, and how crucial it is to be successful, to succeed in this battle with the Yetzer Hara, and man to stay focused, the Yid to stay focused in implementing his mandate in this world, his unique mandate, his unique shlichus, his unique objective and goal in this world of learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and staying away from anything which Hashem says not to do. It is so crucial, again, in order for us to triumph over the Yetzer Hara, which only interferes us to do our Aveda the way we are supposed to do it, with the way the way we're supposed to do it, and the way we're supposed to do it b'shleimus, in a complete manner. In order to triumph over the Yetzer Hara, which interferes, it is only crucial and essential that we maintain that simcha, that joy, elation, uplifted spirit, and so on. And again, despite Alter Rebbe telling us over here that periodically the Beinoni, when he notices that the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, does not penetrate his system and in his experience, he has to know that in his schedule, perhaps in designated times in his day, like Krishma Shalamita, or other times when we speak about these psukim, it is important that, again, based on the suggestion of the Shashiv and Gan Eden, that he demonstrates a Lev Nishbar, or he reflects on who he is as a Beinoni, and with these different suggestions for reflection which the Alter Rebbe presents and suggests over here, which would bring him to the Lev Nishbar and Ruach Nishbara, to the breakup of his system. In other words, via a broken heart and a broken spirit, in order for the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, to penetrate. And it's similar to the log. So this is one of the things the Alter Rebbe is telling him. So this is, this could be pretty distressing. The Alter Rebbe says a Yid, the Beinani does tshuva. Now he's a Beinani. He has no shaychus to chet. In other words, to be chas v'sholem executing a sin, not in action, not in speech, not in thought, and he's so careful. And what are you telling him? In other words, you want to describe who he really is. It's a true description, but does it mean truly that it's still there? Keilu nitzma hayim or pogam, I blemished and I purified today. And Alter Rebbe adds mamash. I mean, this is the way it is. Famously, but Alter Rebbe adds so many times, multiple times, scores of times. You could even add in Tanya the word mamash. It's with precision. And in this case, to say mamash nitma hayim, the Alter Rebbe deals with his vavshik barasa tshuva nechain, even though he did appropriate tshuva. He's the Beinani today, and he taka did tshuva. But nonetheless, we know the ikar tshuva belev. Tshuva is namely in the heart. The heart has so many different levels. As we know, there's no, within the system of man, there's no greater fluctuation in many areas, in so many different levels, than the heart. And the reason why there's so much fluctuation of the heart within the experience of man in this world is because the heart has so many different levels, and there's so many different madrigot, there's so many different steps and levels and compartments and so on. And that's the reason why it fluctuates so much. So all depends how he is in that particular experience. Based on the time that he is, and the place, is known to the Yedim, to the knowers. And therefore the Alter Rebbe says, again, this is similarly the way it is in other areas in our life. The heart fluctuates. It's all because of different circumstances, where I am as my presentation as a human being, or based on the time that I find myself at the present experience, or Ramokim, or the place. And that's, again, the heart fluctuates based on the different places, times, and experiences of man. And in this case as well, the Alter Rebbe says, again, because the heart, there's so many different compartments and levels within the heart. And therefore, how does the Alter Rebbe relating it to this, which he's trying to convey over here, that in despite he's done tshuva? So why are you mentioning that kilu pagam nitmayim chas v'shalom? So Alter Rebbe says there is a point to reflect on this, as if you sin today, and this notion that if you sin today, it's not just to bring you down, but this is just to help you and to put things in perspective, where you are and what are you experiencing this moment. He says we're talking about the Beinani, which is experiencing a timtum halev, a fashtopkeit, a blockage of the heart. The same Beinani that a week before, a month before, he was more passionate with his Creator. He was more passionate with his Avodas Hashem, with his service to God. He was more passionate in his prayer, more passionate in his learning Torah, and in the Kiyum mitzvahs and fulfillment, in all of Hashem's mitzvahs, all of Hashem's mitzvahs. And suddenly today, he doesn't feel that passion. So don't you realize that now, in other words, you realize that the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, is not penetrating. So the Alter Rebbe is saying this will enable you to understand this notion that ki'ilu pagam nitma hayim would put, in other words, that you blemished and you impurified today mamash, based on what the Alter Rebbe said, because the blemish where you the blemished area where you blemish is transcendent of time. This will bring perspective, and this will put things in context of the way you feel today, and allow you to reflect in a very healthy manner. So I'm not here just to tell you how bad you should feel that you have blemished in an area which is transcendent of time, therefore as if you blemished today. He says, but don't you see what's going on with you today? You agree, you identify that today you don't have this passion which you had a week or a month ago. That itself should tell you that your tshuva, which you've done then, which essentially is supposed to be an ongoing tshuva, because you have a blemish in a place which is ongoing, meaning even the tshuva has to constantly clean up something, because the area which was blemished and impurified is transcendent of time. So if today you see, let's see it inside the text, in this moment, you see yourself, that the light of the neshama did not penetrate, does not penetrate within your system. Michlal, that itself is a proof that today your tshuva was not accepted. And that is one of the reasons, perhaps, why the light of the neshama is not penetrating your system. So in other words, Alter Rebbe is aligning this, so perfectly aligning this cheshbon hanefesh, that one's remembering the impurity of the soul, of his sins of his youth, to this which the Alter Rebbe is trying to comb through the reasons why today the Eira Neshama is not penetrating, the light of the Neshama is not penetrating the body. Which would, and what would we gain? So firstly, what is really happening on high is that your tshuva, because it's not something of the past, it's something of the present, hence your tshuva is supposed to constantly clean up that area which you made the pgam, that area which you impurified, that area which you blemished, because again, there's no past, present, and future, the area where you unfortunately blemished and impurified, and therefore the tshuva has to be on a constant basis. So even though it says even the person himself has to be kol yama b'tshuva, but more than that, or together with that all his days has to be with tshuva, and that is extremely important. Even at Tzadik Gomer has to be kol yama b'tshuva. But in this case, even some dealing with the Beinani, which this does have this baggage, certainly has to be kol yama b'tshuva. But together with that, even that tshuva which you've done in the past, which ultimately turned the page on your whole portfolio and your whole system and your whole relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, yet that tshuva must constantly clean that area which you sin. It must constantly wash it down. Even the tshuva which you've done in the past. And why is it so? Because there is no past, present, and future. Just like today, chas v'chalil, if the person would slip, this Beinani would sin today, and then he would feel this timtum alev, this blockage of the heart. He would right away say, I did tshuva, and he would do tshuva. Chas v'shalom, he would sin today, and he would do tshuva. He would do true tshuva. Real charot alav and kabbalah alahava. Which means regretting the past and taking a complete resolution. Like again, Alter Rebbe is with an opinion, the ikra tshuva is to accept firmly and with 100% determination that he's not ever going to ever rescind. And again, he understands, he reflects again as well with heart expression, with bitterness of the heart, based on his understanding what he caused to his neshama and to God himself, and to the levels on high, this blemish and this impurity which he or she caused as a result of their sin. So obviously it touches him in a heart manner as well. In other words, he expresses himself with a bitterness, with mirirus, with bitterness, just basically understanding what has he done and to who he has done this to his godly neshama, consequently, or together with that, to God himself. As the Alter Rebbe uses the expression in the end of the 25th chapter, everyone is invited to look there, to see the description of what transpires when chas v'shalom someone sins. So he does tshuva. So let's say again it happens today, and after he does tshuva, he realizes that he has still lev nishbar. He has still a timtum alev. He has a blockage in his heart, meaning to say the eira neshama, light of neshama, does not penetrate. Meaning to say again how it would translate, it doesn't have the adequate passion in his davening, in his learning, in his connection, in his relationship with God. Wouldn't that bother him? If this all again happened today. So the Alter Rebbe says even it happened 20 years ago, but because we're dealing with a level which is transcendent of time, and therefore the tshuva which we've done 20 years ago has to constantly wash up the stain. And if today, and again the whole tshuva is namely about the heart, and it must reflect in a complete resolution, in as we mentioned, as in the Alter Rebbe is, again, the Alter Rebbe is clear in Igeres HaTshuva, it's about never returning to that sin, never ever returning to that sin. But yet, together with that, it's a hard expression as well. So if you see that today, that tshuva, and therefore that tshuva which you've done even 20 years ago, has to constantly wash up, wash away and cleansing that taint and that stain which you have blemished and purified your neshama. And again, on high, and ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu, particularly, especially as we see the most deepest parts of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which is transcendent of time and place. So it constantly has to wash it up. And therefore today, if you see that you have Timtum Alev, you see that the Eira Neshama is not penetrating your heart. In other words, you don't have that passion which you yourself had a short while before. In other words, because there is this blockage of the Eira, and the other does not allow the Eira Neshama to enter into your body. This in itself tells you that today your tshuva was not accepted. And that's the reason the Alter Rebbe mentions this. The Rebbe adds over here, well, this will conclude, that another reason perhaps that you have the Timtum Alev is not because your tshuva was not accepted. This is more of a more comforting type of explanation. Yet one does not contradict the other. The Alter Rebbe says perhaps another suggestion, that they want to elevate you to a deeper and a higher, more profound level of tshuva, from a deeper, more profound level of your heart, because we know the heart is one of the places which expresses a certain sense of Ein Sof, infinity, true. When you think about an expression of expression, a no-end expression is really the heart. And the deeper you go, you always find there's yet even a deeper dimension. That is the beauty of the heart. You can obviously, if it's utilized and used in the right ways, in the right direction, this is the beauty of the heart. There's no end to the way it can express itself, as opposed to any other. For example, mind. Mind is limited how much he understands. Obviously, you can understand something deeper and deeper, but yet there you see still the notion of finitude in the mind. Certainly, in comparison to the heart, put it this way. So, because again, tshuva is namely about the heart. Therefore, it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to elevate this yid with tshuva yulah yeshet to a more greater, more supreme, a superior level of tshuva, and from a more deeper dimension of the yid's heart. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrates that today you shouldn't have that same passion that you had in the past, even in the most recent past, in order that you should reflect deeper, you should arouse a deeper level of a lev nishbar, a tzebrochene heart, a broken heart, and broken spirit. And again, that itself will uncover even a deeper connection, a deeper expression of tshuva from a deeper dimension, a more profound and deeper dimension with your heart, and again in your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrates all this in order to elicit from you this. He wants to, from Milmaila, from the heavens above, they want to bring you to a deeper level of tshuva. He concludes over here, therefore David HaMelech, which we know David HaMelech was one which Horgi B'tainis, he killed his Yetzer Hara with his fasting, and he was complete in his tshuva. You can't say by David HaMelech that his tshuva was leini skablo. His tshuva was not accepted because David HaMelech's tshuva was maximum, it was complete. Every day of his life, that tshuva, his sin, his sin. In other words, in the eyes of David, his sin was completely, never had a chance to come up to the surface, because it was completely wiped away by tshuva, David's perfect tshuva, to the extent it says that he killed his Yetzer Hara, horigi b'tainis, with much fasting, which again, how does that connect? Not to go into detail now, but we alluded to this because ultimately the body is the host, is to the Nefesh Bahamis, and the Nefesh Bahamis is the host to the animal soul, and the Nefesh Bahamis is a host to the impure forces above. So David HaMelech mortified his body. Again, it's not the style, it's not namely that the Rebbe mentions it, you get a tshuva, it brings from the Arizal, there's definitely one of the ways. Alter Rebbe himself was a great faster, but nonetheless, it's not primarily the doctrine of the Alter Rebbe, as we explained in the previous page, in the previous classes, whereby the Alter Rebbe gave the suggestion to the Beinani to break up his Nefesh Bahamis, in order that the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, to penetrate to break up his guf, rather, to break up his body and his nefesh bahamis, in order to the Eira Neshama to penetrate. Now, Rebbe does not use again the idea of fasting, even though it could be a very ideal suggestion. basis when we just mentioned, because the body, mortifying the body, brings weakness to the nefesh bahamis, to the animal soul, in its animalistic determinations, with its animalistic determinations, brings a weakness to that. Consequently, brings a weakness to the spirit of impurity above. But yet, Alter Rebbe has a different type of message, a different way how to break up the guf, in order, again, like the log, the stiff log, how to break up the guf. He has a different suggestion. Again, and we elaborated in the previous classes, where the Alter Rebbe uses precisely the terms, again, lahashbil atzmelis, nivzebein of nimas. Again, as you can see, the wording of the Alter Rebbe, how he deals with breaking up the guf and the nefesh bahamis, in order to allowing the light of the neshama to penetrate. Yet by David HaMelech, he fasted begashmias. In other words, he broke apart every energy which ultimately would be hosting the nefesh bahamis and the Yetzer Hara, and again, consequently, together with that, the spirits on high, the impure spirits on high, and he completely, the Gemara says, harge, completely killed the nefesh of the Yetzer Hara, b'tainis, via fasting. So his tshuva was perfect. So it couldn't be leinis kabel tshuva. His tshuva was not accepted, similar to the first message the Alter Rebbe suggests to the Beinani. So here the Alter Rebbe says, therefore, based on the latter suggestion, this is the reason they want to elevate him to a greater, a deeper level of tshuva. This is why David HaMelech says, "V'chatasi negdi sami," that my sins are in front of me constantly. Because again, even David HaMelech, which did a perfect tshuva, because you're dealing with heart, leiv, and leiv, there is no end to the expressions of leiv in every area. And again, but in this case, in particular, when we're dealing with the Yid and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so David HaMelech felt v'chatasi negdi sami, because he always believed that he could connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a heart, and a heart with a heart connection, even deeper and yet deeper and yet deeper. And every time he therefore again he always places chatoim negdi constantly in front of him, again not to disturb him in his mandate as David Melech Yisrael, and his learning Teinos, doing mitzvahs, and leading Yidden, leading his flock, leading the Jewish nation to victory, material and spiritual victory. But in as Alter Rebbe later in Ger HaTshuva explains with the negdi, but he always somewhat remembered in his eyes, he always placed, again even in a distant, but he always remembered that chatasi. Why? Because again, despite he's done perfect tshuva like we just mentioned, but it was all about David HaMelech understanding that tshuva, because tshuva is belev, there is no end how much a person could express his amkus halev, his depth of his heart, in his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the context of tshuva. So this is again the reason why the latter suggestion of Alter Rebbe, that the reason why you're feeling that timtum halev is because they want to elevate you to a greater, deeper level of tshuva. But it doesn't, and deeper level of tshuva, and again, this is the whole reason why you're experiencing this. But Alter Rebbe remains, again, to keep things in context. Alter Rebbe is telling us really who the Beinani is, and conceptually, the identity and the entity of the Beinani is namely his nefesh bahamis, his guf is nefesh bahamis, and the point of the Beinani is to allow, to do everything he can to introduce that the Eira Neshama, the light of the Neshama, should ultimately enter and penetrate in his guf and in his nefesh bahamis, and again to translate itself in a fervorous passion, in his avodas Hashem, in his service to God, in learning and his davening, and his doing mitzvahs, and again staying away from anything which is not aligned with the will of Hashem, in a way like the way only the Neshama, the nefesh of the godly soul, the way the Neshama appreciates and only knows how, it's being a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, only knows how to execute and exercise all this, again, the machshav dibur ma'aser, and the thought, speech, and action of the Beinani. Have a wonderful day.